Thank you very much. This meeting will come back to order. I am going to start out to my right with Congresswoman Woolsey, and this will be the time to ask questions of our witnesses.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, witnesses. What a morning.
What a morning.
Good morning, but what a morning.
What a morning.
There is hardly any way to deny, unless you are all sitting here making up stories of how absolute your proof is to what's going on beyond our own Earth. And so thank you for that. That was good for all of us.
Welcome.
My first question is to our wonderful pilot, Santa Maria. You're Peru, you're Argentina. What I want to know is, do you have, I think it's to the gentleman at the end of the table, do you have any kind of a formal relationship, your UFO group, with your Argentina government? And what is it, the Argentine government, and what is it, and how does it work, and what can we learn from that?
Well, all the groups in Argentina, the civilian groups, create a Sephora. And Sephora had been unite researchers for many, many years who were my colleagues and close associates. Some they were disciples of myself. I started researching UFOs many years ago, and we always look for the classification from the 70s to now. The group found the cooperation now of the Air Force through the Minister of the Defense, and through the executive power of the nation. We are waiting to kind of unify that motion. Now it's working also. We have a petition in the Congress of the nation. We have with executive power and also with the Minister of Defense to have release documentations from the past. But there were projects, as I said in my speech. I don't know, maybe the translation was not so good.
No, it's good.
Okay. Of these projects and the projects, not only to release, also to have cooperation. To have cooperation and what the field researchers, we always work alone with no mediums to get to the places, to do good analysis. We really, the groups kind of prevail so many decades with the lack of technical support to do analysis. We have, for example, since the 2000, we have the phenomenon, for example, of the cattle mutilations, who is a very serious, we know through Linda Moulton, her research.
And
for example, the groups need support. It's not only to have the classification of documents who could give light for scientific analysis, and to see what happened also in documents and cases, the Army forces and the Air Force and the Navy research between 1960, as I explained, and today. But there were recent cases too, as I said, in 2011 was this big explosion.
Well, I know you need the information. Are they giving it to you, or are you just helping them?
The classification started slowly, yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually happening.
It's happening right now, yes.
Yes.
It's happening now.
Thank you for sharing that
Yes.
with us. Thank you. Colonel Santa Maria, I can't imagine your experience. There's so much, I mean, I felt like I was sitting on your shoulder when you were telling the story. Afterward, how did your government treat you? Did they take your information and take it seriously? How could they not? But did they? And did you see any life in those UFOs?
la superficie del ovni no permitía ver nada.
We
a su
could not
interior,
actually see
tanto
into
en
the
la parte cerámica
UFO,
como la
not
parte
through the
metálica.
ceramic part or the metallic part.
Y en el caso del gobierno,
As
la
regards
base
the
aérea,
government
los
and the Air
1800
Force,
personas que
the
observaron,
1,800
los
people
jefes
that
de
actually
esa
saw it
oportunidad,
and
se
the
informó
the
a la
commanders
Fuerza
that were
Aérea,
there,
pero
we reported all of this to the
no
Air
hubo ninguna
Forces, but there was
repercusión en contra,
no
nada, porque se
negative
aceptó
repercussions
oficialmente
because
que
it
había
was
sucedido.
officially accepted.
De ahí he seguido volando
The sighting was
20
officially
años más y no
accepted,
había problema.
and I continued to fly for 20 more years without any problems.
So how did the press handle this? And, I mean, what was their response?
El año 80 que
In
ocurrió el evento,
1980, when
fue
this
un año
event
en que
happened,
en
this
esa
was a
base aérea
year
estábamos
that on that
instalando
air base
material
we
de
were
guerra
installing a
nos cuidábamos mucho de la
Civil War
inteligencia de otras organizaciones.
we were installing
Como
Soviet materials or Soviet
el ovni no
installations
llegó
at that
a
place,
acercarse a
and
la
the
base,
UFO
no
did
logró
not
hacer la
actually
inteligencia o el
get
espionaje que
to fly
suponían.
over the
Se dio la
base, and it
orden
was
de que
and
no
so
se
really
tocara el tema, nos quedamos en
we received
silencio
the order
para evitar
to
que
not
gente
talk about this
curiosa,
because we didn't
periodistas,
actually want any
investigadores, bajo
curious
pretexto de
journalists to
investigar
come
sobre el
and
ovni,
actually
circulen por el
research and
interior de la base y
investigate
puedan
this because
hacer
we had
espionaje.
sensitive materials on the base and we
Y
didn't want to
así fue
attract
un
any
tiempo de
undue
22
attention.
años de
And so it was
silencio
22 years
hasta
of
que la Fuerza
silence
Aérea
until
creó
the
la
Air Force
oficina para
officially
investigar los
gave
fenómenos
us permission
aéreos
to
Y
talk
sí me
about
llamaron, me
these
dijeron, "Tu
phenomena,
caso
and
es
that's at that
divino,
time
lo
when they said
conocemos,
that
por
we
favor,
could
empecemos a publicitarlo".
actually start to
De
speak
ahí ya me
publicly
dieron
about
libertad
this
de
issue. And as I
dar
said, they
entrevistas a
finally
través de
gave me the
televisión, los medios
authorization
escritos,
to talk about this.
And did the press come back by belittling the effort, or did they acknowledge it and support it?
Los medios empezaron ya a publicitar
The media
el
started
gran secreto
to
guardado, pero no es
talk
secreto
about
guardado,
this
sino es una
secret that we had
situación
kept
que
for
se
so
mantuvo,
many
pero
years.
no hubo publicidad, no
But
sabían cómo para buscar
They didn't
información,
really
pues
know
la
how to
oficina
get
de la
access to the
Fuerza Aérea para
information
investigar, pues ya
from the
empezó
Air
a
Force
buscar
offices,
casos,
and so
ya los medios comenzaron a
the
interesarse.
media
Periódicamente me piden algún tipo de
was
opinión,
occasionally
entrevista,
would
y
interview me or
contribuimos para la
request an
difusión de este
interview
fenómeno.
just to try to get the word out about this, but it was so many years later that there wasn't a whole lot.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Mr. Gerard,
Yes, ma'am?
can I take these off?
Yes, yeah, I
Thank
will
you.
speak in English. Yeah.
Thank you. And believe me, it's because I'm limited. You referred to American military in the Amazon. How soon did that happen, and what's the relationship there?
The facts that I described happened in the 70s, in late 70s, in 77, and Brazil was, like many other countries in South America, under military dictatorship. And during that period of time, U.S. military and intelligence were all over South America, ruling lots of things there. Now, when Operation Saucer took place, and it happened because the populations of the affected area couldn't live anymore because they were seeing UFOs all the time, and worse than that, they were being attacked. Over 1,000 people were attacked during a certain period of time. There were lots of injuries made by this object that would come from the sky and emit a beam of light towards people's body, making them faint and become anemic. Now, the situation went so intense that the community leaders went to the governor of the state of Pará to ask that something is done about it. And the government asked the Brazilian Air Force to start an investigation to give answers to the population, to the society. Then it was established the Operation Saucer to investigate and to engage the extraterrestrial intelligences, because there was already, and this is in the documents, there was already a knowledge that there was an intelligence beyond that phenomena, and that phenomena was not earthly. Now, when Operation Saucer started as a military operation with all the military system and style, during its procedures that lasted 4 months, and the way it was closed is very interesting. But during this 4 months, U.S. military, U.S. intelligence were visiting those areas and taking part of the operations during the Operation Saucer. And they were talking to the witnesses during the day and sky watching the night with full equipments to try to detect and film the UFOs that were being seen. Now, it was said to me by the commander of the Operation Saucer that at the beginning, in the first weeks, only a few sightings took place. But after the Operation Saucer went on and on, the objects would come more and more boldly and to the direction of the areas where the military were camping.
So, was the U.S. military part of that saucer project with you?
Not officially.
Were they at the table?
Not officially. They took part in lots of procedures, including, this was told to me by the commander of the Operation Saucer himself, Colonel William Giolanda, that they were having problem in documenting the UFOs with photographs. Some UFOs were hard to photograph, but they solved this problem when the U.S. military came to Brazil and gave to the Brazilian military some equipment and highly sensitive films so they can not only photograph the UFOs, over 500 pictures were made, and also film the UFOs. 16 hours of film were made of including motherships over the Amazon River.
So do you have any idea of whether or not that information and those films were shared here in the United States?
I don't have that information. I truly believe
would it have been all right? I mean, was there some embargo in their relationship with you that would say you can't take our information back?
No, I think that the whole thing about the cooperation with the Americans is that they take the information back to the United States.
Okay.
You know, they were there to collect information, as they were in Argentina, in Chile, in so many countries, to get information about those phenomena and bring back to the United States to use for their own purposes.
Well, thank you very much. So, Mr. Junios, you mentioned that the traffic control group, I mean, was housed in the Air and Space Museum.
Currently, yes.
Oh, okay. But it started out in another...
Yes, the Technical School of Aeronautics.
Right.
That was the office initially, and...
Well, when you told me that when you told us that it had been taken from one area to another, when I heard museum, I got a little concerned that it was saying this is all past and you're not going to be working on
no,
current
what it is,
and future.
it's not in the museum itself. It's in the Museum of the Aeronautics. It's in an old airport. It used to be the main airport, Los Cerrillos, but what happened, like it happened in many cities, the city grew too much, and also was done when the runways were smaller. So eventually, the airport, or Los Cerrillos, is no longer functioning as an airport, but they're still using the hangars and things, and they created a museum. But the facilities of the committee, the CFAA, are annexed. But it has nothing to do with the museum.
So it worked for convenience. It worked for you.
Yeah.
All right.
They also have an office at the main headquarters of the Civil Aviation Agency. But according to what General Bermudez told me, they'd rather be at that other place, he said, because when they are in the headquarters, if they have to make an official presentation or something, of course, they can use that facility. He said, everybody's asking them questions. Oh, what's going on with UFOs? Have you seen any? So he said, we're in the other place, nobody bothers them. They can work quietly and do their job.
All right. I thank you, and I thank you all. My time is up.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ms. Kilpatrick.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to start with you, Mr. Trabb, but I think I will. I think you're the first that I've heard in 4 days who said the presence of the others actually attacked people that caused the Operation Saucer project to come into existence. Is that right?
That's right.
I don't think I've heard that before. Certainly haven't heard
Perhaps
it
not.
in America. Matter of fact, it probably happened. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. We just haven't heard it reported like that. What year did Operation Saucer start?
I'm sorry.
What year?
Oh, it started in September 1977.
And how long
and
did it last?
ended on December 1977. It took 4 months only.
Okay, okay. And you also mentioned, in this from Congresswoman Woolsey, the U.S., did you say they took your information and you were waiting to hear back from them? Or something you were saying about, I don't know if maybe you supplied the information from Brazil in this instance, and then they were to report back or something? I don't know. What was your relationship with the United States of America? And this is for all of you all. The information on your presence, your UFOs, your whatever that's being called. What relationship, if any, did you have with the U.S. government, and did you forward or share any information from your country with the U.S. government?
Me personally?
No, Brazil.
Oh, Brazil, of course.
Brazil, all of it
Well,
for your country. I mean,
see,
for your country.
Yes, there is a common sense that the U.S. government is acting in many places of the world.
It's what?
Is working, operating in many places of the world, collecting information about this subject. It is reported that the U.S. military have been to several countries collecting information about UFOs. Now, we just saw when Commander Santa Maria presented his case, a document that shows that the U.S. intelligence was getting informed of what happened in La Jolla Air Force Base in Peru. The same thing happened in Brazil. During many years, we have had U.S. military coming down to Brazil and taking part of investigations of UFOs. And it's not only in the past, like 4 or 5 decades ago, but also in recent cases.
Okay,
now,
stop. Okay, that's sort of. Can each of you respond to that, Mr. Hunas? And we'll go right down the line. Just want to know what relationship, if any, does U.S. have with your experiences and your acts of what we're discussing this week? I mean, do you automatically give it to them? Is it because we have military bases there? Is it because you may get appropriations from us that you must share this? What reason and
Well,
what is that connection?
In the case of the CFA, in fact, General Bermudez told me that when they created the office back in the late 90s, they contacted the American government, I guess through the embassy, because they wanted to have some kind of formal relationship. But there was no response.
They did not respond. What
No,
year
but
was
they
that?
do. That would have been probably late 90s. But they do have an agreement with not an official group, but it's called NARCAP. I think it stands for National Aviation Research Center for Anomalous Phenomena. Something like
Located where?
Well, it's run by a former NASA scientist, a very serious man called Dr. Richard Haynes. And he is an expert on aviation cases. He's a longtime NASA scientist, very serious. So he's lectured, he's gone to Chile, they have very close relationship because he's an expert on aviation cases and the CFAA is run by the Civil Aviation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but NARCAP is not an official agency of the U.S. government.
It sounds like a nonprofit of some sort, and we've had
Right.
some testimony here to that effect on our U.S. side that would probably equal that.
Correct. So the other thing is what my colleague Jevaer was mentioning. If you study the American declassified UFO files, which are extensive, you will see a tremendous amount of documents, especially back in the old days, but there's still some more recent, collected by various agencies, usually through the Defense Attaché Office, or sometimes by the CIA. And it's obviously that these people are, monitoring the international aspect of UFOs.
And does Peru get information back from the U.S. regarding any of what you send them?
Well, I cannot speak for Peru. In the case of Chile,
Chile.
There might
Excuse me,
be some
Chile.
at the level of intelligence. They probably do,
Chile.
but then that is not revealed publicly. You
Okay.
see, what General Bermudez wanted was to have a formal.
I understand.
But because of the transparency law, that would have had to be revealed publicly. So the
Okay.
U.S. just did
Okay.
not just never responded.
That's Brazil, Chile. Colonel Sanchez, could you respond?
En el caso de Uruguay no tenemos ninguna relación de intercambio con Estados Unidos, no existe.
Exchange relationship with the United States.
Do you share any of your information as you testified to us this morning with U.S. or any nonprofit or other entity that may not be government? Do you share any of that with the U.S. government or a nonprofit or an agency here in our country that would know what Uruguay has experienced?
Con
No.
ninguna agencia
No,
civil.
not with any civilian
militar,
or
del
military
gobierno de Estados Unidos
agency
se
or
comparte absolutamente
U.S.
nada de
government
información.
agency. There is
Thank
no
you.
sharing or
Okay.
exchange of
Thank you very
information.
much.
Okay.
Dr. I want to
Bueno.
say Choi, is that right? No.
Bueno, en realidad,
Well, the truth
una de
is
las cosas que uno puede
that
concluir después de
one
haber
of the
escuchado
conclusions
varios
you
días
can
a todas
draw
las personas expuestas,
after having heard the testimony of all the witnesses is that the UFO phenomenon is one of national security, and therefore the intelligence element is extremely important. As far as we understand, in Peru, there is no open, formal, public agreement, but there are indications that show that some of this information is shared with U.S. security agencies. There's no open public documents, but there are witnesses who have noted that in the 80s, apparently a UFO fell in the San Mateo de Huancho area, and they said that there were Americans who were in that area. And I do want to remind you that in the Greer Disclosure Project, there were people who made statements, gave testimony that stated that there was a U.S. Sergeant, Jonathan Wangan, who said that a UFO had crashed in northern Peru and that there was extraction, and this was according to testimony, that they took some of the remains of this fallen UFO. They were taken away by helicopters that were definitively not part of the Peruvian armed forces.
Excuse me? They were not part of Peru, taken away in helicopters. What country was that? Who took them?
De acuerdo al testimonio
Based
del
on
Jonathan Wangan, que
the
está dentro del
testimony
Project
from
de
this
Stephen Greer, eran
Stephen Greer's project,
aparentemente aparatos
apparently
norteamericanos,
they were
porque
American
fueron extraídos
helicopters,
y llevados a los
and
Estados
because
Unidos.
then that these
you.
materials were taken back
Thank
to
you.
the United
De
States.
nada.
I'm going to change for Colonel Santa Maria. You're a brave man to go up and down, back and forth, zip, zip, with something you don't know what it is, and you're trying to shoot it. That's pretty brave. I'm going to commend you for all of that. You did get away clean and free and healthy. That's a good thing, and thank you very much. I'm not sure I want to ask you that same question. I do want to go to Argentina and ask the same question. Do you, Argentina, share either with government or non-government organizations any of your experience, any of the things that you've witnessed to us today with the United States of America, either through its government or other nonprofits or unaffiliated?
Pretty sure I am sure there's some kind of no open communication, but it's possible. But officially, I don't see any kind of document or interaction between
The two. Okay.
Argentina government and
Nothing
US,
official.
U.S. agencies, yeah,
Okay.
officially. But regarding, we were talking, also was a very interesting case I researched in the decade of 70, 78. There was a UFO crash between Argentina and Bolivia. And supporting what Dr. Choi said, was an object who produced a kind of destruction of a hill, was a kind of cigar-shaped structure of no identified And the Bolivian government studied, the Argentinian wasn't limited, didn't investigate, but that object was retrieved by Americans' helicopters too.
Oh, stop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have no relationship with them, but in that instance,
Right.
and other instances around the
Right,
around
it's
the
the
table,
border, right.
we have been on the scene at some of your current experiences.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Goes back. I want to go back to Dr. Choi for just a moment. Your point was well made in terms of national security. So, do you all in South America share your information and experiences and enhance or whatever your national security because of what you see and how closely you live together? And just one person, I don't know.
There is an agreement at the level of military in all South America. They share information about a wide variety of subjects, of items, and UFOs is one of them. It has been confirmed by top-ranking military in Brazil and in other countries. It means, in the military level, which is it's independent than the politics. There is.
Did you say independent of politics?
Of politics, because presidents can come and go,
Right.
but the military stay. And as they stay, they have to have a channel of communication among themselves, so they can talk about interests of each other of the
That
continent
applies in this
itself.
country too. We just don't acknowledge it as such. It does.
Something like that.
Presidents change, but the military-industrial complex is alive and well and
Yes.
continues so. Yeah.
Right. I'd like to
wait,
add
wait,
that.
just a minute. Just one last question. I've got 1 minute. So therefore, South America, I believe this is an international issue and that we ought to go back to our Congresses and others, but I also think we ought to have UN presence, and there's been some. Will your countries help the citizens hearing on disclosure go to the UN to ask for their help in this subject, and will your countries help petition us with that?
Yes.
Yes, of course. It's what we want. We
That's
would
what-
like. We
You
would
didn't
like.
say it. You didn't say it. I want to hear it. Okay, that's good. No,
Yes.
no. I think that's good. That's what we want to hear.
Because
Thank you.
these official agencies, they want a place where their data can be shared officially with other countries, because the UFO phenomenon, by definition, is global.
Right.
Like I said, they don't care about national boundaries.
They
That's
care
our
about
problem.
national security, though, and technology. So, I mean, it's got to be a way to do it, I think, and you all may know better, and so certainly more people in this room know better than I.
Well, that is the problem, because as you know, in Congress, I'm sure you've dealt with many issues dealing with intelligence and national security. There's all kinds of things going on under the rug, I mean, informally. Intelligence agencies, they have their own procedures, but those are not made public.
Okay, stop, please.
Yeah.
The United States of America knows of your instances. You all said that, most of you. They don't tell us. They know yours, and then they make mockery of it. It
Well,
doesn't
because
exist.
the U.S.
Okay,
government
my time
doesn't
is out.
acknowledge.
I yield back. I know, but we got to get to what we got to get to. I want you all to know, and I commend you for all that you do and that you work together. But if our military gets your information and does whatever it does with it, and I hope to make a better world and a better global presence so that we all might live the next 50 years, that we also work together to do that. I'm not so sure. Some work with you and some don't. We got to open it up. We got to address it, or there will be no universe. You all understand?
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Representative Cook.
Thank you. Chair, I'd like to turn to Colonel Santa Maria for a moment. This Department of Defense memo that's stamped in June of 1980, that was, I guess you actually showed this up on the screen, also is attached to your testimony, or your story, I should say. And then, of course, you testified about this. Is this memo referring directly to your experience that was indeed, as someone's already said, very dramatic and had what we call here, and I think everywhere, the wow factor to it? Is this a memo that relates to, that's to you? And are you prohibited from telling us or something? But it sounds like this happened in April. This is something with the June stamp on it. It looks like our Joint Chiefs of Staff. Confirm, if you can. The Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States of America have made these comments, or at least received these comments, from Peru, and we have this in writing as a document that talks about these very experiences of shooting at UFOs, with the statement, I have to say here, that the source has been known as credible before in all respects. In other words, what you experienced was not even questioned by people, and copies of this, CIA, a National Security Agency, I could go on. I mean, is this a smoking gun or what for trying to open up some files here in the United States? I mean, but now I want to hear your answer. Because it sounds, well, whether it was you or not, something very similar to what you said happened. It looks like in April or May, so I'm thinking it might be you they're talking about here. Go ahead.
El año 2007, en este
In
mismo
2007,
edificio,
in
fui
this
invitado
same
para
building,
una
I was invited
convención
to
para
take part in a
clasificación de
conference
documentos
on the
por periodistas de
declassification
Debriefing.
of documents. There was a journalist,
Con
Edwin
el
Kane,
cineasta, director James Fox,
and there was a filmmaker, James Fox, who was making a documentary. And they turned over a copy of this document to me, and they said, "We would like to invite you to our country because our country has accredited this encounter." And so when I reviewed the data in 1980, the only encounter with a UFO was my encounter. And so the date of this memorandum was about 28 days later. So there were no other occurrences at the same base. So I believe in the sharing of information, you can see that this was the event being referred to.
Well, thank you. And I just want everybody in this room to hear that even though, again, we have a humble observer that doesn't like to in any way overstate anything, that was a really strong yes to my question.
It was.
There's no other way to interpret that. And I appreciate that. And I have to say, since the way you described this, and the fact that you actually shot, I'm going to use the word bullets. I know that that's not the right word. I'm not much in knowledge of Air Force weaponry and so on, but you shot at this. And are you a good are you a good target? Are you a good marksman? I don't know the right word to use.
He's not a target.
No. Obviously, you shot at this. And would you repeat again what happened?
Durante la operación
Well,
fueron 22
these were
minutos
22 minutes
interrelacionarme con el objeto que tenía,
of this
subía,
in
esquivaba,
relationship
yo
where we went
maniobraba
up
mi
and
avión,
down,
para
and
mí,
went
era
around.
una astronave
It was
de
trying
combate.
to
Lo bueno que era
avoid me.
maniobrando
I was pursuing
buscando
it.
el disparo.
And I was
Inicialmente,
trying to
cuando yo
fire.
disparé,
When I
fueron
first
ráfagas
fired,
de un
these were
obús de
bursts
unos 30
of
milímetros,
30
o sea,
millimeter
3 centímetros
shells.
de ancho,
So
alrededor
they're
de
about
5 de largo,
3 centimeters wide, 25 centimeters
básicamente
long.
destruyen hasta un
And
camión.
they can destroy a
Lanzamos
truck,
64
a
buses
single
para
one.
que haya una
And there were
pared de fuego que
64,
arrase con
so
todo
it
lo
was
que había
just
cerca.
a barrage
Y no
of
ocurrió
fire,
nada.
and nothing happened
Fue
at
la
all.
sorpresa.
And that's what was
Ahora,
so
la
surprising.
posibilidad de errar
No.
era muy difícil.
If the possibility of not hitting my
saqué la
target,
lista,
it was
pero tengo
practically
premios
impossible.
por-
I've
Thank you
won
for saying
awards
that.
for marksmanship.
Tengo un par de premios por
So
ganar
I
concursos de
have
tiros
won
desde
some
avión. Por eso me dijeron,
shooting
"Anda tú y
contests,
asegura
and
el
so they were like, "Hey,
la
you're the
instrucción".
one who needs to go up there.
Y
You're the
dentro
one
de
who
eso,
needs to chase
básicamente,
this
¿cómo es
thing."
nuestro entrenamiento?
And
Nosotros disparamos.
And I
It's
just don't want
intelligent.
you to be quite so humble in the way you're explaining this, please. Because he took a little too long to say, hey, he wouldn't really have missed this. Now, he didn't say it that way. He said it more carefully, but there's no question. You wouldn't have missed it based on everything you said and based on how those 30 caliber shells, as you've described, would have taken out a truck. I mean, you didn't even have to be a great shot, but they picked you because of your ability to shoot at something they were worried about coming in on the airbase. Am I correct? And I want you
Yes,
to
that is
continue with your
correct.
answer as far as what happened after you shot the way you did at it.
O sea, le decía de las ráfagas.
Well,
nosotros en
so I shot these
entrenamiento
bursts. In our
disparamos sobre
training,
blancos de
we
3
are
metros
always
por 3
firing
metros.
on 3-meter by 3-meter
Y en este
targets.
caso, el ovni
And
era
in this
10
case,
metros
this was
por
a
10
10-meter
metros,
by
un
10-meter
La posibilidad de fallar
objective
era,
target.
cero, ¿no?
So, I mean, the
O sea, las
possibility of
balas le
missing
han
was
caído al
zero.
objeto.
I mean,
Cuando
these
comenzó a
hit the
alejarse,
object, and when it started to
la
move
postcombustión,
away,
Master Warner en el
you know, I
avión
put
para
on my
perseguirlo,
post-combustion so that I could
maniobrar,
chase it, to
apuntar,
maneuver,
buscar
to
siempre
try
ese
to get in
ejercicio mental de
position.
ver
But it's this
cómo-
mental exercise of
cuando
how am I
se
going
esquiva,
to
dice,
do
¿por qué
this?
lo hace
And when
y
it was
cómo lo-
moving away, I thought,
cómo
how
lo-
is it doing
lo puedo
this?
atacar mejor
How
en las
can I better
diferentes formas
attack it? So
hasta
I
que hubo esa
tried
decisión
different
de,
positions until it came
acelerar,
to the point
supersónico,
when
subir
it,
muy alto,
it had
descender en un
supersonic
ataque
speed. When
vertical,
it would go up,
que
I
ahí
tried
sí
to
te
get
subían los
in
Pero
my
cuando
sights
yo he
vertically,
pasado al costado
but
del
when I moved to the
ovni a
side of the
1.3 Mach,
UFO at
el ovni,
1.3
según los
Mach,
estudios de que está
the
detenido, alcanzó
UFO,
1.2
which
Mach
was
en
stopped,
ascenso vertical
it
y sin tener
achieved
motores.
1.2 Mach
O sea,
in a
ese
question
es un
of
objeto
seconds
que no lo
without
hace
any
nadie, ¿no?
engines. This is something that
O sea, un movimiento de
nobody, no
ascender de
craft can
de
do.
cero
To just go from
velocidad a 1.2
0
Mach
to
en
1.2
vertical
Mach
para emparejarse
vertically
conmigo y
to
acompañarme hasta,
reach my same
como
position,
decimos,
it's
un ovni que sabía
this
las
is a
posibilidades de mi avión,
UFO
porque
that
me medía
knew
la hora que iba a llegar
the
al
way
alcance de disparo y
the way our aircraft
me
worked,
evadía,
because it was
llegó hasta el
able
final sabiendo que ya mi avión no
to
daba más,
anticipate
etcétera.
my moves and
Y
then
después del
follow me.
aterrizaje,
And then
me reuní
once
con
I
personal de
landed, I
inteligencia de la
met
Fuerza
with
Aérea,
intelligence
revisamos todos los
officers,
catálogos de
and
armas
we
para
looked
ver
at all
posibles objetos de
catalogs to see
espionaje
what
así
possible
teledirigido,
spy
y
objects
todos
this
usaban
might have
motores,
been, but they
ventanas,
all
planos,
had
o sea, no
some
había
type of
nada como lo que había
engine.
observado y
There
quedó
was
como
nothing
no
similar to what I
identificado
had
y
observed.
con
So this was
tecnología
an
que hasta
unidentified
ese momento no
object, and
conocíamos eso de
we
la Tierra.
were unaware of any type
si algo
of
que existe, si
technology
me
on
permite
Earth
hacer un
that
comentario.
existed. Will you allow me to make a comment?
Please, Mr. Choi, yeah, I'd like to hear Dr.
Quizás
Choi's,
por la-
since you're from Peru, of course. Go ahead.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you
Quizás por la
very much.
humildad del comandante
Perhaps
Santa
because
María,
the commander is so
no le he dicho
humble,
estos datos. Pero yo
he has
quiero
not
rescatar algo
expressed
que yo creo
certain
que ustedes
details, but
deben-
I
deben
wanted
saber
to
y deben-
share
debe
something that I
subrayarse.
believe that you
I
should know
would
and I
ask
should
if I could
underscore.
interrupt you for one moment, I would ask the colonel to nod his head yes on any detail where either yes or no, just to make sure that he's, because I agree. One of the problems is you have not a problem, in my opinion, but you have somebody that does not like to in any way bring attention to himself or overstate his own abilities or what he did when he just description that's denied by our Joint Chiefs of Staff was just amazing. I just want him to confirm what you say because I do want to believe that it would be useful to this panel to have him acknowledge anything you say that would add to that. Go ahead.
Sí.
Una de las cosas que se ha deslizado
One of the things that
en los días pasados es
that
que
we have
existe la
heard in
posibilidad
previous
de que
days
muchos de
is
los
the
eventos
possibility that
ovni
many
sea
of these UFO
tecnología
events
terrestre
are due to
secreta militar.
earthly
Pero en este caso de Santa María,
craft. But in the
yo
case
creo
of,
que queda la
of
prueba de
Colonel
que esto
Santa
no es
Maria, we
terrestre.
can prove that this
En
was
primer
not
lugar, cuando Santa María
anything,
me
any
lanza lo que
technology
se
we
llama
see
en
here on
la
Earth.
terminología militar,
In the
una pared de
military
fuego,
terminology,
68
there was a
obuses del tamaño
wall
de
of
una gaseosa
fire,
grande.
basically, that he came up,
No
that this
existe nada
object came
en
up
la Tierra
against.
que
There's
pueda
nothing
soportar
on
eso, ni en
Earth
el año
that could
1980 ni en
defend
el año
itself against that,
2013.
specifically in
No
that
solamente
time.
porque
Not
lo
even up to
soportó,
date,
sino
not
porque
because
Santa
it was
María
able to
ha hecho un relato
to
cuando yo
only
le
defend
pregunto
itself, but as the Colonel
cuál
stated,
fue el impacto que ocasionó en
well,
el
you
objeto,
asked him what was
no hubo
the
impacto,
impact that it had
absorbió
on
el
that.
impacto.
It actually, there
Estoy
was no
como
impact. It
hablando como una suerte de una
absorbed
película
all
de
of
ciencia
these
ficción. Absorbió el
rounds.
impacto.
It
Eso es
actually
imposible
absorbed
de que
it. That is
pueda soportar
absolutely
una
impossible
tecnología
for
terrestre. Lo
any
más importante
Earth
es
or
que
any technology that we have
Okay,
here on
Dr.
Earth to be able
Choi,
to
if I could
absorb
just
that type of
if I could interrupt
barrage.
you for just a moment and say, do you agree with the 2 or 3 important points there that Dr. Choi just made?
Sí, estoy de
Coronel.
acuerdo porque
Yes,
varias
I do
personas
agree
hemos
because over time, we have talked about the possible situations and the different perspectives that exist. Obviously, I fired, and there should have been some sort of impact, but there was nothing. There was no the bullets didn't even explode. There was no explosion of the barrage of what I was firing.
Okay,
so
thank
it
you
just
very much,
absorbed
and
it.
I'd love to continue with this, but I do need to ask another question here with just a minute on my time
We
left.
have 1 minute left.
That's right. That's why I said I'd like to go over here to Colonel Sanchez. Your system in Uruguay that apparently has been in existence for 33 years, you say, that to track and keep track of anything that's cited. It's called, I can't remember the operation name of it, or the, excuse me, let me grab my notes. I was so mesmerized by the previous testimony. But the system you have, where you outlined the 5 or 6 steps to even get qualified to be seriously looked at, and then tracked as far as any UFO sightings that your organization in Uruguay keeps track of. Do you have records of things similar to what we've just been talking about with Colonel Santa Maria? And I'm not sure if Peru and Uruguay, they do have the same language, don't they? Well, you obviously heard everything anyway, but through these translations. So I'd like to know anything that might be in that, that kind of talks about this sort of thing. And since I'll be out of time, if you keep your answer somewhat short, but go ahead.
Sí, efectivamente nosotros
Yes,
hace 33
we,
años
for the last
tenemos
33
una
years,
comisión,
have
de la
had
Fuerza Aérea que
an Air Force
representa ante la
Commission
opinión pública todo
that
lo
also
investigado en materia
is accountable
de,
to the
de
public
objetos
on
voladores
all
no
issues
identificados,
dealing
UFO.
with
Esta comisión
UFOs.
está compuesta por
This
civiles y
commission
militares
also has
y
military
sí
and
tiene
civilian
un
members
archivo
and
de
also does have
1,300
archives of
casos
1,300
investigados, del
cases
cual
that
hay
had
un
been
3%,
investigated,
unos
3%
39
of which
casos,
there are
40
39
casos
or 40
que no han
cases
podido ser
now
resueltos
that
por el
have
nivel de
not been
extrañeza,
solved because of
y
the
los
level
clasificamos como
of
casos no
bizarreness
convencionales.
that
La
they
Fuerza Aérea Uruguaya
presented,
estudia desde el
and
punto de vista científico
Uruguay
el tema
has
UFO,
scientifically addressed the
no descarta
UFO
la
issue
opción
and does not rule
extraterrestre,
out the
pero para ello
extraterrestrial element.
necesitamos
But for
evidencia,
this, we do
evidencia
need
científica. Sí
scientific
tenemos casos
evidence.
como
We
el
do have
del coronel
cases
Santa
such as
María
that
con
which
aviones
Colonel
de
Santa
combate que
Maria
han perseguido objetos voladores no
mentioned,
identificados,
and how
y
fighter jets
hay
were
dos
scrambled
casos
to
de
chase
personal
these
militar que ha abierto fuego en tierra, no en el aire,
these objects, and how there was a chase,
esferas
an in-air
luminosas
chase,
que en
and
algún
following
momento se
glowing
acercaron a
objects, and
polvorines en
sometimes they
bases
would get
aéreas
close to, and how these objects would get close to air bases throughout
Thank you so
throughout
much
Latin America.
for that information.
Thank you.
A wise course, by the way.
Thank you.
Trust but verify.
Senator?
Thank you. I'd like to start with our colleague from Brazil.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the government responded from an investigatory point of view to the apparent violent attacks that took place in the Amazon area, killing people. Now, that's the first, at least that I'm aware of anywhere in the world, where an aggressive attack resulting in loss of life that was the product of a flying saucer extraterrestrial effort. Could you elaborate a little bit more specifically on the investigation that was made over the death of these people?
Yes, sir. We don't know for what reason that took place, but that happened. During 2 or 3 years, like 1976, 77, 78, we had casualties, at least 4 casualties. And we have a record of 400 people attacked. Not only people, but also animals were attacked by these beams of light that would come from these balls, these spaceships. Sometimes they were referred to like a can with a windshield and 2 persons, 2 human-like creatures inside of it, operating. that spaceship. This has been described in detail by lots of people who live in the area of Salgado, especially in the island of Colares, which is 60 or 70 miles from the city of Belém. And this has also been reported by the military. Now, the very interesting thing about it is that when the military decided to camp there and to conduct their investigations, the attacks stopped. Very rare attacks took place in other areas, but not where the military were. And also, when the military decided to change their camping from one point of the island to another point of the island, the objects that would be hovering those previous point, that previous point where the operations were taking place, would move to the other area, like it, in the own words of the commander of the operations officer, Yolanda, like if these intelligences knew what the military were doing in that area. That's very amazing. These are only 440 pages of a total of 2,000 pages that were produced as a result of the Operation Saucer. I would like to address this to you. I would like that you have time to examine this, because this contains very hard information collected in a military fashion by military men on duty investigating UFO in a confidential, not top secret, but confidential, sometimes reserved operation by the Brazilian Air Force in the Amazon.
Has the military who've been in charge of this investigation, have they been transparent with the public in Brazil?
As I told before, on that days, we are under military dictatorship, so there wasn't much transparency.
Presently, after the dictatorship left.
Yes. The gentleman that conducted the Operation Saucer, the commander of it, was a captain at that time, and he retired as a colonel. And 20 years after the Operation Saucer was shut down, this man called me and invites me to his place, to his house in Rio de Janeiro, where he was living. And I spent 2 days with him, interviewing him extensively, where he gave me full details of everything that happened during those 4 months. And he also described me how he and his men had a close encounter with the creatures that came in those objects. And that actually, this main encounter with an alien creature that took place in mid-December 1977 was what caused the Operation Saucer to be shut down. And in my reading of it is because the Brazilian military wouldn't know what to do if this contacts, open contact among military and extraterrestrial start being regular in the Amazon. What we can do now. So then the Operation Saucer was shut down. But just to add a few more pieces of information, that it was only, as to say, shut down to make pretend, because the Operation Saucer then became, in a second level, much more secret and was conducted for several more months under military, U.S. military command in Brazilian territory.
Well, I think you partially answered the next question, was that was there a U.S. presence interfacing with your military in the investigation of these UFOs?
Yes, sir.
You have documentary evidence of that?
I have the reports given to me by the commander of the Operation Saucer that he interacted many, many times with Brazilian intelligence agents members and U.S. intelligence
Which would be the CIA.
That will be the CIA and also military. They will be all over the Amazon looking for the same kind of information that we are looking for about who are those intelligences that pilot those machines.
Do you not find that somewhat bizarre that our government now officially says that there's no investigation that we were involved with, no documentation?
I would say that is more than bizarre.
Okay. Let me move on to my...
See, even our government is admitting in a far extent that there has been official investigation. Now, we started in Brazil in 2004 a movement, a campaign called UFOs Freedom of Information Now, to request to the government to open its files. And we have succeeded. It's the only model like this in this planet where the society have asked its government to come clear about it, and it came, at least partially, because we have got from 2008 to 2010, not only 4,500 pages of UFO document, but also like 300 to 400 pictures of UFOs. This is all given to the society. Has all been put in the National Archives. Anybody can go to the National Archives in Brasilia or in Rio and see this.
Was there panic in the streets when this was revealed?
Not at all, not for a single minute.
So the people were mature enough to accept this knowledge?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me go to my friend from Chile. Do you have any knowledge of American military presence or intelligence presence interfacing with the officials in Chile gathering information on UFOs?
Not really, except if you look historically, some of the FOIA documents released by the CIA or the defense, usually was the defense attaché office, that they would, if there was a very important case, they would send those guys to collect the information. But so historically, in some of the release files, there are occasionally some documents about Chile, but not recently. Good. So I have not seen. And like I said, General Bermudez, the head of the committee, actually wanted to have a relationship, but he wanted to be open and official.
And so, we didn't want that.
No, we didn't want that.
So that says a lot. With respect, and you've drafted, or you've worked with Danny Sheehan in drafting a resolution that can come from this body, trying to refer this matter to the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Yeah, because there has to be a mechanism, like I said on the first day in this hearing.
Could you circulate that document as soon as possible to the members, so we can begin to digest it, okay?
Okay, although we have really not, this is a kind of thing that we need to discuss,
draft,
but we will give you the draft.
We're all very sophisticated in dealing with drafts and first writings, but we can massage something as long as we have something in our hands.
Okay.
Let me go to my colleague from Uruguay. Did I understand you correctly that your system of investigation has been transparent and open to the public from the very beginning? Did I understand that properly?
Sí, eso es correcto. De hecho, es correcto. De hecho, Uruguay ha publicado a través de esta comisión un libro que yo traje aquí para mostrarles con más de 20 casos de Uruguay, casos oficiales, escrito por el primer presidente de este grupo, el coronel Eduardo Aguirre, que escribió este libro hace 11 años. Fue publicado para que el público se mantenga informado de toda la actividad
so that the public could follow all of the ufological activity in Uruguay. There are also press conferences, and the information is even taken to the schools to talk to them about this and even educate them on this issue. This commission is made up by both civil and military members. It has a work methodology that is designed, or that was adopted in 1979, and this methodology was also shared with China.
You just said that this was brought to the schools so it could be educated to the young people of your country? Is that correct?
Sí, correcto.
Yes, that's correct. The UFO issue is something that everybody likes to hear about, especially young people, at least in Uruguay. And they request the Air Force, they request that the Air Force go and give talks to the kids
cantidad de lugares.
And they go to many different places.
My congratulations to you in
Muchas
that
gracias.
regard.
Thank
I think I still have some time, don't I?
you. You have 1 minute?
1 minute. Quickly, Dr. Cho and Colonel Santa Maria, when the helicopter, U.S. helicopter, retrieved the materials from the downed UFO aircraft, was there no reaction to a violation of your sovereignty by the United States of America, or do you just accept these kind of violations as a matter of course?
Bueno, en realidad esta información
Actually, this
nos enteramos
information,
recién
well,
a
we just
partir
recently
del
learned about
Disclosure
this
Project
based on the Disclosure Project
Dr. Stephen Greer,
that
a
Stephen
través del
Greer
testimonio
carried out
de
based on
este,
the
oficial
testimony
militar,
that a military
Jonathan
official,
Wenga.
Jordan
Esto
Wenga,
circuló
provided.
en los
This
círculos
was
ufológicos
circulated
peruanos,
in the UFOs
nunca ha llegado
groups
a los medios
in
de
Peru. It never
comunicación
made
en
it
el
to the
Perú,
press
que
in
se comportan
Peru.
exactamente igual como se comportan aquí en
The,
los Estados
and the
Unidos,
press
¿no?
is the
Cada vez que
same
sale una
here
noticia sobre
as
este
it is in
fenómeno,
Peru. They don't
ellos
really
señalan,
talk
los medios
about
de
it.
comunicación, que
And
generalmente es
so
un
the
psicosocial
media
para tapar a
generally
un tipo de corrupción
try
política.
to cover up any
Entonces,
type
como
of
no hay
thing like this. And so
trascendencia,
there's
menos el gobierno
no,
lo
so
toma
the
en
government
serio
doesn't
y
really
queda
give
ahí
importance
nomás,
to
cuando
this, and they just say, well, it's just
definitivamente es,
we're
desde
just
mi
going to
punto de
keep
vista,
it in the
una clara
corner
violación
here,
de
and
la
they're just going to say that there wasn't a
territorial.
real invasion
Good,
of
thank you.
sovereignty.
You should take a page from the Uruguayan approach to the issue. Colonel Santa Maria, who gave the order to shoot? Was that your own initiative, or did it come from higher headquarters as you were selected and taking off?
La orden fue interceptar y
The
destruir.
order was to intercept and
Porque
destroy.
era un objeto
Okay,
que
good.
posiblemente venía a ser
Because this
espionaje
is
y
something
no
that
debería
could
llegar.
invade our
That
airspace.
that's right. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Your
think
time
my
has
time has
expired.
expired,
Your time
so I
has
can't get to
expired.
Argentina. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will go to Representative Bartlett.
Thank you very much. First, I want to apologize for my tardiness. This is National Day of Prayer in the United States, and for a long time, I had been scheduled to be the main speaker at a county-wide National Day of Prayer breakfast this morning, and so I fulfilled that obligation, came here so soon as I could. We have your testimony then. Thank you all very, very much. While our military and our government is saying that there's no such thing as no possibility of a UFO coming from from another world, they of course admit that there are UFOs. UFO simply means unidentified flying object, and the Air Force says that in their Project Blue Book, there were 701 of them that they couldn't wish away some way or another. So they do admit they're unidentified flying objects. They simply are denying categorically, I think, that they could be of extraterrestrial origin. But while they seem to poo-poo the whole thing here and relegate it to the ha-ha corner, they apparently are aggressive in participating in investigations of USO sightings in South America. And I'd just like to start here with Mr. Guevara and go down the table. Have you tell each of us briefly, is this true in your country and to what extent?
Yes, it is. Actually, I'd like to take this opportunity to speak about crashes. It has been said here in this table and during the precedent years, days, that crashes of UFOs have happened. Most of them in old days, but there is at least one recent crash, and it took place in Brazil in 1996. It is called the Virginia case, in which an alien spacecraft crashed and at least 2 creatures were captured and offered no resistance to its capture, but they died right after they were captured. And this procedure were taken of rescuing the debris of the UFO and capturing the creatures were taken both by the fire department of the city of Virginia with the army personnel of nearby headquarters. And in the next day, the following day of the capture, we already knew that U.S. intelligence and U.S. military, and as well as U.S. doctors were sent by the U.S. consulate in São Paulo to the city of Varginha to follow the procedures. The doctors were sent, medical doctors from the United States, to follow what was being done about the creatures because they died and nobody could explain how were their morphology, how they function. And we know for a fact, because this is a very well documented case that has been investigated by at least 70 UFO researchers, including UFO researchers from the United States, as Dr. Roger Lear, Dr. James Hurtak, and the deceased Dr. John Mack from the Harvard University. They have been to Brazil. They confirmed what the UFO researchers from Brazil discovered. And we know for a fact that at least one of those two creatures were taken to the United States by U.S. military, and it was taken in one of the Buffalo airplanes that serve the U.S. embassies and consulates in South America. When it came back to the United States, it brought back to here one of the creatures and part of the object that crashed, that were rescued, that were retrieved by the Brazilian military. Yes.
Yes. Well, in Chile, I don't have really much information about other than what I said earlier, that there were some documents, from the CIA, but they tend to be old. But I do want to bring up a case that was mentioned by my colleague Chonetti, which happened in Bolivia, and we don't have anybody from Bolivia here, so I'll speak briefly about that case because I'm familiar with, and it's a crash too that took place in Tarija. Which is on the border of Bolivia and Argentina in May of 1978. In this case, we do have some documents, not Majestic 12 type documents, which are controversial, but these are officially released documents under the Freedom of Information Act, including a telex from Secretary of State Cyrus Vance at the time. And also Air Force officers from the Defense Attaché Office under a project that was called Project Moondust, which is well established that existed, which was for the recovery of space objects. I mean, that's how they started. As soon as the space age took off, in 1957, then the Air Force created this project Moondust for the recovery of space debris. But according to one document, they list space debris, and in those days only two countries had space projects. That was the United States and the Soviet Union. And then it says unidentified flying objects in the same document. So when this incident happened, two officers from the Defense Attaché Office, which were stationed in La Paz, the capital of Bolivia, somehow showed up in this remote area. And unfortunately for them, as they were coming in the airport, they were photographed by a local reporter. And the picture, you can see them, they're trying to hide their faces, but there they were photographed, and the picture was published in the press. So they cover stories that they were on vacation. But that's not a type of city you go on vacation. Number one, they were not with their wives, so obviously that was a cover story and a pretty bad one. Nevertheless, this was in a very remote area. We only have probably a very partial file from the US. There's only a few documents. I'm sure there's plenty more. Where the case gets a little murky is as to whether something was really retrieved and taken back to the US, or it may still be there because it was in an extremely remote area and there had been like a landslide on a mountain. There was an expedition initially by the army, by the Bolivian army, under a lieutenant, and they finally got to the area, but they didn't have the equipment and the facilities to do something. And there are some rumors that something was retrieved and taken to the United States, but then according to an American reporter who did investigate this case, his name was Bob Pratt, he's now deceased, he thinks that they never did retrieve because it was such a remote area, so that object might still be there. But again, it shows that there is an interest on the part of the United States, and we have uncovered some documents, but there's probably much more.
Thank you. Colonel Sanchez.
En el caso de Uruguay, en
In
materia
the
de
Uruguayan case,
investigación
as
UFO,
regards
no existe
UFO
ningún
investigation,
intercambio
there is
con
no
Estados Unidos.
official exchange with the
Los
United
únicos
States.
intercambios que
The
hemos
only
hecho con
exchanges that
Estados
we have
Unidos ha
had
sido
with the
en la
United States have
recuperación
been,
en el año
it was
2011
the recovery
de
in
un motor
2011
Star
of a
48 de un
Star
cohete Delta
engine
II que
Delta
cayó
II,
como
which
chatarra
fell
espacial
over
en
our
territorio uruguayo.
airspace.
Personalmente fui quien
I
recuperó
personally went
ese
to
objeto,
recover
pero en
that
materia
object.
ufológico
But
hasta el
as
momento
regards
no
UFO
tenemos ningún convenio
issues,
de
we have
intercambio
no
ni hemos hecho
exchange agreement
intercambio
with
con
them,
Estados
nor have
Unidos
we
nunca.
carried out any official exchange with them.
Dr. Troy.
Bueno, en el caso de mi país,
In the case of my country,
esto se maneja a dos niveles.
I have
Hay un
understand
nivel
that
que
this
es un
is
nivel público,
this takes place
en el
at
cual
two
la
levels.
oficina
The
de
public
la
level,
Fuerza
in
Aérea
which the Air
funciona
Force Office is in
como
charge
relaciones
of this
públicas, pero
through the
entiendo
public
que hay otro
relations, but
nivel
I
en el cual
understand
sí
that at another
hay
level
intercambio de
there
información.
is an official
Y este es
exchange of
constante. Eso se
information,
puede
and this is
ver
a constant
porque luego
exchange of
estas noticias
information. We can
llegan
see because
a los Estados
afterwards
Unidos.
we can see the
En cuanto
information
a
does make it
caídas
to
de
the United
ovnis,
States
sí
when
se-
there are
ya los dije
UFO
anteriormente, en el
crashes.
caso del comandante
For example,
Jonathan
in the
Winter
case
de los
that
Estados
that we
Unidos,
mentioned
este caso de San
before,
Mateo de Huancho en el
the
año
San
80,
Mateo
en
de
el que
Huancho in
lamentablemente no existe
1980.
documento porque se
Unfortunately,
maneja
there
a
are no
nivel de
official
secreto, pero
documents.
sí a
Everything
nivel
is
de
at a
muchísimos
secret level,
testimonios que hemos
but we
recogido.
have received many testimonies on exchange of information.
Colonel Santa Maria. Comments, please, on any participation of our either intelligence or military, any other part of our government in investigations of UFOs in your country.
No conozco que haya
I'm
habido
not
participación
aware of any
oficial para ver
official
ovnis,
US
pero la cadena de
involvement on the
inteligencia
UFO issue,
siempre
but we do
comparten
know
sus
that in the
informaciones entre los
intelligence
países,
exchange
así
there
como
is
el
an
Interpol, me
exchange of
imagino.
information
Que
between the
siempre
intelligence
a un
bodies.
evento nuevo se
Anytime
comenta
there's
entre
a
ellos
new
para
event,
estar
there
actualizados.
is an exchange of information to update the intelligence communities on these issues.
Mr. Chimene.
Yes, well, regarding, as I explained to the Senator, in matter of ufology, on research, I'm not aware of any documentation exchange between Argentina and United States. But regarding to other agencies, as NASA, well, NASA has in several cases of Argentina is a place where it's a lot of space junk, it's a lot of debris, satellites coming from international, also other countries. And I researched many cases where many debris coming, but different kind of procedures. In the case of NASA, yes, they asked for particular cases if they were part of American missions, and there was a few cases of retrieval, yes, but we were talking about only space debris.
Oh, thank you. It's very interesting that there's apparently a different attitude on their part if it's outside this country. Within our country is total denial, but if they really believe that, then they wouldn't be participating in these investigations in South America. Mr. Guevara, you have mentioned that Operation Saucer was shut down. Is that simply because it then went underground, then went secret? They continued the investigation, but secret now?
The main reason for why the Operation Source was shut down was because there was an actual contact among the military, William Jolanda, the captain that was commanding the Operation Source, and an extraterrestrial creature. It took place on mid-December 1977, and as part of his duties, the commander of the Operation Saucer has to go back to his commander, a brigadier in the city of Belém, and report weekly what was going on during the Operation Saucer. And when he did that week, then when he informed to his superior that he had an actual encounter with a creature, 2 arms, 2 legs, a body, a head, with a helmet that came from a UFO 300 feet long that almost landed close to the Guajará-Mirim River. When we reported that to the Brigadier Protásio de Oliveira, his commander, then William Jolanda was given order to shut down Operation Saucer and return all material and bring all his men from the jungle to the city and give it all the material, all the information. Then we realized, we knew, I've been seeking information about it for quite 20-some years. I have gathered lots of information about it in my in my pursuit for details of this, that the operations saucer changed its name, changed its personnel. All those 3 dozen men that were commanded by Wood and Yolanda were taken off the scene, and the new personnel took the operation under a different name and under U.S. military command from several months after December 1977.
Thank you. One quick question to Colonel Santa Maria. What would be the...
You have less than 1 minute.
Less than 1 minute. I saw that. Thank you. I saw that. What would be the arguments for and against the suggestion that what you were dealing with was kind of like a giant hologram rather than something physical? Your bullets had no effect on it. I'm just asking, if that was the argument, that could it have been a kind of a giant hologram, what would be the arguments for that? What would be the arguments against that?
Holograma difícil por
Well,
la
it'd be difficult for
característica
it
de
to be a
estar presente,
hologram
visto de diferentes
because
ángulos.
I saw it from
Y
different
uno
angles.
cuando se desplaza y
And
podría
when it
cambiar como
moved,
holograma, llegar a
a
63,000
hologram
pies
could
con la
change,
misma firmeza de los
it could
colores.
change
bien
shape,
difícil
but the
para esa época.
colors
O
were
sea,
very
era un
solid.
objeto real,
It was a
no
real
virtual.
object. This was not a hologram.
It's an object that we can't understand if, in fact, there was no effect of bullets on it. I'm just curious. We're dealing with phenomena here that we cannot explain in terms of our physics and so forth here. And I'm just wondering what the various options are. Thank you all very much. Or we can have a second round. I have some additional questions.
We will probably have a very short round.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. 1 question per person, however. Thank you very much for being here today. Great testimony.
Thank you.
I would like to hear from each one of you what's the attitude? Here it is, well, if you believe in unidentified flying objects, or you believe that there's spacecraft that comes in, there's been such a damper by both the press and our government about believing this. I mean, you're sort of made fun of if you look at this and say, yes, this is real. What's the attitude of both the people and your press? And we'll start with Mr. Joran.
Thank you. This is definitely not a matter of belief. There is a lot of data that has been produced by civilian UFO researchers, military UFO researchers, a very few but very dedicated scientists for the last 60 years to confirm without any question at all that we are being visited by several species of more advanced, at least technologically more advanced civilization that come here, and as objects that they design, they construct, like a Boeing does this, its airplanes here, they must have something like that in their planets, and they visit other planets in the universe. It is as simple as thinking what we are doing presently. We are at this very moment on Mars, on Moon, taking photo of satellites of Uranus, of the rings of Jupiter, of whatever. We are exploring our backyard. The difference is that our technology presently only allow us to explore this backyard. But if we're doing this now, in 2013, in 20 years, in 30 years, in 50 years perhaps, we will be able to do interplanetary trips with crews inside our spaceships safely, effectively, go and come back. So if we can do this in the near future, and we're working on that, definitely, this advanced civilization that started the evolutionary process much before us, they are doing the same. And they may have been doing the same for quite some time, perhaps hundreds of years, thousands of years, we don't know. The universe is so full of life. and the variety of this life, in the formats and levels of evolutionary process, it's just unthinkable for us at this point. But we are grasping the surface of this. We are doing history here. We are doing what we are supposed to do, to question and to whatever we find out, take to the society, make the society know that we are being visited. Because we may very well, at any point, receive their visitation in an open and frank way. And the world has to be prepared for that. It's not out of question that one day we will exchange with them, we'll engage, we'll live with other societies from other planets. It's just a matter of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Antonio?
Yes. Well, you're asking about the social attitude of the public and
the press.
in the press
Yeah.
in Latin America. I would say, in general, it is much more open than in the United States. Whenever there is an important UFO case, it gets covered in mainstream newspapers. So if it would be like here being covered by the Washington Post, by the New York Times, but seriously, or at least semi-seriously. I mean, there is some ridicule, of course, but not as bad as the US. The scientific community, on the other hand, has been very conservative, generally speaking, in Latin America. I would say that there might be more scientists quietly doing research in the US than in Latin America, although that is changing. Now that they see these official commissions, then that gives them some cover.
Right.
If some general that is attached to the Civil Aviation Agency asks professors from the universities, then that gives them cover. But in the past, it was curious to see that the press and the general public and the governments were more open, but the scientific community was more closed.
Interesting.
They were just afraid, maybe, because the peer pressure is always bad. And one thing that General Bermudez told me, which I found it very interesting, is that he said the pilots, the airline pilots, were very cautious. Normally, because, in the past, airline pilots, they never wanted to report UFOs publicly because it may affect their career.
Right.
They don't want to be known as the UFO nut, you know that. So he said they're trying to condition them that it's okay. I mean, after all, this committee is from the Civil Aviation, and these are official forms. But he said they're still, it's easier for them from the military pilots, because if their commander tells a military pilot, here's a report, you fill the form, then
Right.
officers follow orders, right? But the airline pilots is still volunteer. But the fact that this agency is with the Civil Aviation, that is also changing. And of course, because they are with the Civil Aviation, that's their primary source of information. Usually comes from pilots who are, in the course of their flying, they're seeing something. They don't know if that is another air traffic or is something else. So they will call the control tower, says, well, I see an object, in that corner. Do you have any air traffic? And then usually the control tower, well, in some cases they probably do, and then that's filed away and it's not a UFO case. But in other cases, they don't. So then the control tower says, no, we have no scheduled traffic there. And these communications are recorded and preserved. In the old days, probably they were erased after a while, but now they're preserved. And then there's official reporting forms that the committee gives them. And then, but it is still up to airline pilots. That part is still volunteer, whether they want to fill the report or not. So they have to be conditioned.
Right.
But they're being conditioned by the government, so hopefully that will change.
Colonel Sanchez?
Yo quería decirles
Well,
que
I
en
wanted to
principio,
tell you
la
that
Fuerza Aérea Uruguaya, como decía hoy en
the
la presentación,
Uruguayan Air
no descarta la
Force
hipótesis
does not
extraterrestre.
rule out the
Este
hypothesis that these are
fenómeno está
extraterrestrials.
reconocido por
This phenomenon is one that we've seen occur in Uruguayan airspace, It could be different probes, something else, but we need scientific evidence to prove it. That's why our commission works using scientific methodologies, but we do so through the Air Force. I believe that people's attitude and the media's attitude in Uruguay are very respectful, given the fact that for 33 years, the Air Force has been spearheading UFO investigations in Uruguay. And so I believe that the Uruguayan people have reliable and transparent official information and understand that. The situation in each country is different. In the case of Brazil, United States, these are massive countries with large tracts of land and very sophisticated defense systems. It's not the same in Uruguay. Uruguay doesn't develop weapons. We don't have special aeronautic or space research. So I think that's why there's greater acceptance. However, in the case of the United States, it's something that we all know. Defense is very important, and so they have to keep some secrets when it comes to sharing information. I've heard people mention over these days that these UFOs could be a new prototype of an unmanned aircraft, and that might make things difficult for the Department of Defense, or especially for companies that build these, Lockheed or Boeing. And that's why I believe that there are greater reservations, and I think that that's natural in terms of sharing information, as in terms of what's been flying around out there. That's at least my personal opinion.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes, you were talking about how about believing or not in UFOs. I support what our colleague from Brazil said. It's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of information. The information is out there, and over these 5 days we've been talking about it very openly. However, and I'm struck by how this is addressed in the United States. They underscore the fact that these civilizations are potentially aggressive, the nuclear aspects of this. That's very interesting because we don't look at it that way. It seems like that there might be politically correct extraterrestrials, because they might be offensive in some way. But in Peru, when we hear about cases of encounters, we have very credible testimony of people who've had contact in many different cases, but it's always been with civilizations where there have been attempts made at engaging and having communication. If you look at the case of Santa Maria, where there was this quote-unquote clash, and where all of the ammo was fired, you would expect a response from the others, but there was none. It seemed like it was like a cat and mouse game. And if they wanted to destroy us, they would, clearly with their technology, they would have been able to do that, and they haven't done it. So I think our approach is very different. It's not, we look at superior technology, but not in military framework. But there are many visits that we're receiving. We have to look at it. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to explain it scientifically yet.
Thank you very much for your comments. Colonel?
Yes, just with respect for how the media treats us when there's a UFO case. I've worked with many airlines and crews, and I would say that starting in the 90s, pilots talk very openly about experiences that they've had, what they've seen, what they've heard, because, again, nobody makes fun of you or laughs at you. It's very normal now to talk about sightings, and that doesn't have any impact whatsoever on someone's career, and I'm very pleased that that's the case.
In my experience with Argentina, I have 3 decades as a journalist, international, and I saw evolution. When I started, the media was more kind of kind of skeptic and was hard to be interviewed, was hard to kind of open this Pandora box of the subject. But I saw it's all over the world, the scene is changing. For example, with series as the History Channel, Ancient Aliens, or UFO Hunters, the people is kind of totally more open. Today, for example, we are discovering planets similar to the Earth every day in the news. It's incredible how the astronomy and the exobiology is every day in your breakfast table in the newspaper. And that attitude also help with the UFOs too. And for example, regarding with the pilots, it's interesting how the Latin American pilots are so open. Every time I travel, I go to the cockpit to talk with the pilots, and the pilots have experiences different to the United States, who the pilots are more shy. I said, what happened? We have only activities south of the border and not here?
Yeah.
It's interesting. See, sometimes I feel ridiculous asking, but I always go also to the airline I travel in, United American Airlines, and say, no, they don't talk too much. But I think it's a totally paradigm shift. It's a shift now in all levels of consciousness. And I think it's positive for the new generations. When I was growing up as a ufologist, my own family was kind of, so, oh, no, he liked these subjects, and they were not kind of accepting that, also the media. But I think it's totally a new hope for all of us.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one question from each panel member, if you have one.
I have a question, and Dr. Choi was absolutely my straight man on this one. My question is to you, Colonel Santa Maria. There was a phenomena in the surprise that the object, the UFO, was not attacking back. And would you respond to that?
Sí, una actitud pacífica
Yes, it was like
inicial
a
que cuando yo
peaceful
comencé
attitude.
a
When I
atacarlo,
began to attack
él
it,
evadía, pero
it
nunca hubo el
evaded the
acercamiento,
fire, but it
nunca sentí la amenaza de querer
never did I feel a
atacarme
threat
o-
that it was going to
o-
respond by
o sea,
attacking
simplemente a la
me.
hora que ya terminé
It's simply
combustible, me
when
acerqué a
my
verlo de
fuel
cerca y
it
descubrí que
was
era
out,
un objeto no conocido
I
para
just approached it and
nosotros los
saw
reporteros.
that it was an object
Ahí
that
vino la
was
impresión fuerte de
unknown
saber qué
to
fue,
me.
y
I
como
just
tenía
went to
que
see what
darle
it
la espalda
was,
para retornar
and
a mi
I
base,
had to
y ahí sí
turn my
tenía cierto
back to
atrevimiento de
return
que
to
no
the
me
base. I
persiga,
thought,
pero no,
I don't
pero
know,
en
maybe it's
principio
going to
no-
start
no pasó
chasing
nada
me now,
relevante.
but nothing of the sort happened.
Thank you.
Representative Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Colonel Sanchez and Dr. Choi, what kind of scientific information do you seek that would verify the phenomenon?
Bueno, nosotros en
Well,
principio no sabemos lo
we
que
in
estamos
theory have
investigando.
no idea what it is we're
Manejamos
actually
con una
investigating, so
metodología
we use
científica,
scientific
la
methods
investigación.
to conduct our
De hecho,
investigations.
puedo comentar que hemos encontrado
I
en el
can
año
say that in
1993,
1993,
en la acción de dos esferas luminosas
we
en
saw
un campo
two luminous spheres
interior de
hovering
Uruguay,
over a field
estas
in the
esferas
interior part of
luminosas
Uruguay,
que
these
medían
luminous
aproximadamente
spheres
unos 30, 40
that measured
centímetros
about
nada más
30 or 40 centimeters,
tamaño,
no more than that.
dejaron huellas en
They
donde se
left
constató científicamente a
prints
través de
where
estudios de
scientifically,
laboratorio,
through
la
laboratory studies,
disminución en
we
fósforo,
saw
zinc y manganeso.
a
Estas esferas fueron vistas por más de
diminishment
10
of
testigos
phosphorus
y
and
se
zinc
sacaron
and
muestras de
magnesium.
donde
So
interactuaron
samples
muestras
were
del suelo,
taken from where it had
sus
touched
huellas, dejaron
the
8
soil.
huellas,
We saw there
y
were
se constató
8
la disminución de
different
fósforo, zinc
tracks
y
there, and
manganeso.
again there was a
De ahí en
reduction in
adelante,
phosphorus, zinc, and
nosotros
magnesium.
seguimos trabajando
We
con el método
continue
científico
to use scientific methods to investigate in an attempt to see if this was reminiscent of any type of other interaction we've seen, or because of the color, the energy, but we don't know because we don't have anything else to analyze. However, we continue to work on projects that have been underway for several years. We're working with Norway in an analysis of lights that have been seen hovering over Uruguay, over dams in mountainous areas of rivers where there have been witnesses. We have photographs. We're trying to conduct a film and photographic analysis. And again, we're also working with Chile on this. We have a written agreement between the Uruguayan and the Chilean Air Force in the sharing of information and data. And Uruguay and Chile have a joint investigation on UFOs on Easter Island.
Thank you.
Bueno, en el caso mío,
In my particular case,
en el caso mío, cuando trabajé en la Fuerza
when I
Aérea
was
Peruana,
working with the
colaboré
Peruvian
con
Air
ellos en
Force,
esta
I
oficina
was
OVNI,
cooperating with them
definitivamente el enfoque
in their
era
UFO
una
office. The
investigación
focus
seria,
was
formal,
on serious,
científica.
formal
Nos dieron
scientific
cuestionarios a los cuales debimos
investigations. We were given
interrogar la manera como
questionnaires
hacerlo,
that showed us how
cruzar
we
esta
were supposed to
información con
interview
otros datos
people, then we had to
meteorológicos,
cross
etcétera.
this information with weather
Pero en el
data,
caso,
etc.
esta mañana
But
hablé acerca del
this
incidente
morning
Chulucanas.
I was talking about the Chulucana
Definitivamente
incident.
estas esferas de luz
We saw
se
these
movían de
spheres
manera
of light
inteligente
that
porque
moved
interactuaban con las personas.
intelligently because they
O sea, cuando
interacted with the
los testigos querían
people.
acercarse,
The
las bolas se
people,
abalanzaban
when
sobre
they
ellos.
saw,
Cuando los
when
testigos
people
se
tried to
retiraban,
approach,
las
they
esferas
saw the
regresaban a su
spheres
sitio,
approaching,
desafían
then
toda
going back to
explicación,
where they
digamos,
were.
de acuerdo a la ciencia
And so
convencional.
it
Y yo
defied
entiendo
conventional
que ahora,
science,
después de 13 años
and we
investigar
sought
este fenómeno,
explanations. We
que la
investigated for
única
3 years
alternativa de
and
poder
saw the
empezar a
only
entender el fenómeno
way of
escapa
understanding this
a los cánones
phenomenon,
tradicionales
again,
de la ciencia. La
escaped
investigación científica
traditional
tradicional, y que es
scientific
posible que
canons,
tenemos que explorar
that it was
otros
possible
aspectos.
that we had
Un
to look
congresista de
for
ustedes
new
dijo,
possibilities.
si
And
el
in
único problema
a
es que
conference,
si
I was
viven tan
saying that
lejos,
the only
73
problem
millones de
is
años luz, ¿cómo hacerlo?
if it's 73 million
18
light years
de
away, how do you
octubre
continue to
de
analyze
julio
it?
del
And
2010,
in
una casa
2010,
en
there
Lima,
was a
Lima,
home
Perú, la
in
capital
Lima,
de
the
Perú,
capital of
hubo
Peru,
un fenómeno en una
where there was a
casa en la cual
phenomenon
todas las cosas empezaron a
where
salir volando,
things
los
started
televisores se
flying,
saltaban,
floating
las cortinas se
around,
encendían,
things
y hubo un
exploded,
celular
and
del
there was
dueño de
a
casa que fue
cell
guardado en
phone
otra-
from the
en otra
home's
casa.
owner.
Y
It was
25
found in
personas
another
vieron
house, and
cómo
25 people
celular
saw how that
desapareció de esta
particular
casa
cell
y
phone
apareció en esta
went
casa donde
from
ocurrieron estos fenómenos.
disappeared from one house
Y
and
esto
appeared
no
in
es que
another house.
voló y se trasladó,
And it
sino
wasn't that it
simplemente
flew
desapareció en punto A
from where
y
place.
apareció en
It
punto B.
disappeared from
Esto,
point
que
A
podría
and
llamarse
reappeared
la
in
ciencia
point
ficción,
B. This
teleportación,
is something
fue
like
testigo.
teleporting from
Lamentablemente,
science
esto,
fiction,
lamentablemente,
but
tiene
it had
un
witnesses.
nombre que se llama fenómeno
That
paranormal,
it's
que es quizás
people
una
call
mala
this
palabra para la
paranormal
ciencia.
phenomenon,
Yo creo
which
que debemos
is
abrir
like
un poco
almost like a
el
cuss
marco
word in
teórico para
sciences.
poder entender el
But
fenómeno.
it's we have to
Muchas
look at
gracias.
ways to
Thank
try
you
to
very much.
understand these phenomenon.
Thank you. Representative Cook?
Yes, Colonel Santa Maria, I'd like to ask you, so that we can do due diligence on any possible other explanation or hologram explanation, for example, could you tell us what your air squad commander ordered you to do that day? How many people on the ground witnessed the globe as you've described it initially as about 600 meters above the Earth at about 5 kilometers away from the base, and particularly interested in how long at speeds that you described as 1.6, up to 1.6 Mach speed, you did this, you kept this globe in your sights.
Cuando el globo se acercó a
When,
la base,
when
fue
this
observado por
balloon
1.800
observed,
personas
there
que
were
estábamos en la hora de la
1,800
formación de
people
la mañana.
who were in our morning
Observaron
formations,
visualmente el
And so they visually saw this globe. Radar had not detected it. And I was ready to fly. And so I got the order that there's an object that's not responding to radio communications. It's not on the radar. We thought it might be spy equipment, and it was in restricted airspace for civilian flights. So I was given the order, this could be a spy object, and so I was given the order to pursue it. And so if it did not move away, that I was supposed to engage it with fire. So 1,800 people witnessed it, but 400 people were in combat positions that if it started to attack, that they would intervene. So as I fired and it moved away from the base, the other 400 kept their position. They remained on standby. And they saw that it moved up in the air and the object moved away. So I chased it. I think it was 1,800 people who saw this very clearly.
Thank you.
Senator?
No, I have no further questions. I just want to congratulate the panel coming forward because you have added a very unusual dimension to what we've been trying to prove, and that is that our government has not been straightforward with it, the American people. So thank you for helping us prove that case.
Yes. Representative Bartlett?
Our chair has asked 2/3 of the question that I was anxious to ask. And the question I was going to ask was, would you tell us, just go down the line and tell us the attitudes of your people, your press, and your military and government? And you've asked the question about the people and the press. So let me just ask the question. I want just a one-word answer from you. Where your military and your government is on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is open and accepting and investigative, and 10 is denial and ridicule. Our country is pretty close to 10. Tell us on that scale where your countries are. Just a number.
Just a number. Being 0 total openness.
Yeah,
and
1 or 0
ridicule.
total openness, right, yeah.
I would say we are 3.
3? Pretty good.
2, 3.
Okay.
Well, after this, the Foz do Iguaçu letter and the recent meeting at the Ministry of Defense in Brazil 2 weeks ago, only 2 weeks ago, maybe we can go an upgrade to 1.
That's fantastic.
I don't know.
Well, I think that we have to distinguish between the recognition that the UFO phenomenon is real and the extraterrestrial hypothesis, because that's another step. So in the terms of the acceptance of UFOs as a real phenomenon, I mean, we have the statement from General Bermudez. Another important ufologist in Chile from the Army is Major Bravo, who was with the aviation branch of the Army. That would be a 0, a 1. They totally recognize that the UFO phenomenon is real. But the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that's another question, because then you would have to have a body or a piece of metal or something that really could be proven. So there, I don't know, they admit the possibility, but there I would say maybe a 6 or 7 as far as the ET part. But the UFO, total acceptance that it's a real phenomenon and that it may pose possibly a threat to aviation, and that is something that governments should take seriously, absolutely. In South America, that is accepted today.
La visión en Uruguay de la Fuerza Aérea Uruguaya,
from the point of view of the Uruguayan Air Force, I would say it's 0. Because Uruguay, through its Air Force and UFO Investigation Commission, even welcomed the idea of extraterrestrials as a possibility. However, there are 40 cases, again, that we've been unable to resolve because of how odd they are. And you have civilian pilots, military pilots that have chased these UFOs and have taken photographs. So I would say the openness in Uruguay means that people have a good image of what the information we're providing is. They believe it's reliable. And again, we use scientific methods because there's no other way to do it from our point of view. And the groups that address UFOs, like spiritual groups, that are also working and investigating this, accept what we are proposing. And we've even held a conference in 2012 where we invited all of the groups in Uruguay that do these investigations. I think people were very happy, and I think there was acceptance. Thank you very much.
Congresista,
Thank you, Congressman. Before giving my response, I would like to clearly state that I profoundly love my country, Peru, and I profoundly respect the armed forces of my country. In fact, they gave me the opportunity to work with them, and I profoundly admire the American people here as well. I want that to be very clear before I respond. What you're asking me is very complex, because at the moment when the Peruvian government decided to open this investigation office, they were admitting that there was a reality to this. And they're not going to open an office on unicorns and ghosts. No, that's not what we're doing here. But on the other hand, this has been going on for 13 years, and we have seen minimal results. And when I talk to the military personnel, they say that they have seen UFOs, but they can't come out publicly and say it because there is a policy that has not yet opened up. And so I would say that that's why I couldn't give it a 10, but that would just be my response.
Oh, the Argentine government doesn't pronounce on the extraterrestrial hypothesis open, but in the history of our traditions, for example, in 1968, the president of Argentina, General Onganía, said, "I believe in the flying saucers. Yo creo en los platos voladores." That openness always exists. In that case, was the president of a nation. But the government is investigating the UFOs with scientifically correctness in this moment. And in the future, maybe it will be some pronunciation. That is it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank our panel for being here today. This has been really interesting, and your openness and what's happening in each of your countries has been, I think, a real eye-opener for the rest of us. And with that, I'm going to conclude this hearing. We will be back here at 1:45. Meeting adjourned.